If you've been feeling lonely lately, like God is distancing you from people and situations that used to be part of your life, it may not be a coincidence. Often, isolation is the way God chooses to prepare, test, and strengthen those He has chosen for something greater. In the Bible, all the great men of God went through periods of solitude before being lifted up to fulfill their purposes. Moses spent 40 years in the desert. Joseph was separated from his family. David spent years on the run. Even Jesus had to face 40 days of fasting and temptation in the wilderness before beginning his ministry. Maybe you're going through this right now, but why? Here are 3 reasons why God might be isolating you. When God isolates you to prepare you. Before God uses someone, He prepares them in private. Often that means separating them from the environment they're used to, removing distractions and influences that could hinder their growth. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, but wasn't ready to lead. After killing an Egyptian, he fled to the desert and spent 40 years tending sheep. It was in that solitude that God shaped his heart to become the deliverer of Israel. David, before becoming king, spent years in the fields tending his father's sheep. What seemed insignificant was actually a time of learning. He fought lions and bears, which prepared him to defeat Goliath later on. Maybe God has placed you in a season of solitude to work on something within you. He might be teaching you to trust Him more, grow your faith, and strengthen you for what's ahead. Isolation is not rejection, it's preparation. 2, God isolates you to test you. Another reason God allows isolation is to test our hearts. When we're surrounded by people, we often lean on them. But when we're alone, we must learn to rely solely on God. Joseph was sold as a slave by his own brothers and spent years away from his family unjustly, imprisoned and forgotten by many. Yet even in solitude, he remained faithful. He could have turned against God or given in to temptation, but he chose integrity. The same happened with Jesus. He was led by the Spirit into the wilderness and spent 40 days being tempted by Satan. No one was there to encourage or support him. It was there, in isolation, that he showed his spiritual strength and defeated temptation with God's word. How many times have you felt forgotten, like no one cared? That might be your test. The real question is not whether you're alone, but what you do with that loneliness. Will you complain or use this time to grow spiritually? 3, God isolates you to separate you from the world. Sometimes God pulls us away because we're surrounded by people or influences that don't align with His purpose for our lives. David was anointed king as a young shepherd, but before he could take the throne, he had to flee Saul and hide in caves. His isolation wasn't punishment, it was protection. Had he stayed in the palace, Saul might have killed him. Sometimes God removes friendships, relationships, or environments that could harm us spiritually. It may hurt in the moment, but it's God's way of protecting us. If you feel like God is removing people from your life, don't force things. Trust that He knows what He's doing. You might not understand now, but one day you'll see it was for your good. What should you do when God isolates you? Use this time to seek God more. Let your solitude drive you to read the Bible, pray, and strengthen your faith. Don't fall into the temptation of going back to what God already pulled you out of. The devil will try to use your loneliness to lead you astray, but remember, the wilderness is not your end. It's just a phase. Be patient. God's timing is perfect. Moses, Joseph, David, and Jesus all went through isolation before being exalted. Your time will come too. Stay strong, overcome temptation, and trust that even when you feel alone, God is with you. Now tell me in the comments, have you gone through, or are you going through, a season of isolation? How have you been dealing with it? If this message spoke to you,